Hello, everyone. We are really glad to be here and sharing with you some reflections related with a project that we have been working since 2 years ago. Our research group, name is Huellas Incómodas in Spanish. In English is Uncomfortable Prints. And we are from Universidad Autónoma del Estado de México and University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm really glad to share this presentation with Alan Colin and Verónica Benítez. They are part of this group. We are going to talk in this occasion about the barriers to accessing and using web archives in Latin America.
Hello, I'm Alan Colin-Arce. I'm a research assistant in this project. And we would like to start this presentation by showing this map that contains the web archives in Latin America that we know of. We are aware that there are 6 web archives in 4 Latin American countries, which are Mexico, Colombia, Puerto Rico, and Chile. The country with the most web archives is Mexico, with 3. 2 were created in Mexico City by the research center called El Colegio de México, and by Mexico's largest university, which is a web archive on COVID-19 in Mexico. We are creating also, as part of our research project, a web archive on Latin American feminist activism as part of the Huellas Incómodas research project. Besides that, in Puerto Rico, in 2019, they created a web archive in collaboration with the Internet Archive called Ricky Renuncia, but they stopped updating the archive in 2019 because it was a thematic collection. And finally, in South America, we know of 2 web archives created by national libraries. In Colombia, on Archivit, the National Library of Colombia created some collections, but their last scrolls in those collections was in 2016, so these are not active collections anymore. And in Chile, they do have some active collections, which were created by Chile's National Library, but that web archive is only partially available online, and some contents are only accessible in person in certain libraries in Chile. So after showing you the very few web archives that exist in Latin America, we would like to discuss some of the barriers that limit the creation and the access of more web archives in the region. The first type of barriers that there are linguistic barriers. And the first one is very simple, but it is really challenging, especially when discussing web archiving with people who have never heard of it. And that barrier is that in Spanish, the word for file is the same as the word for archive. So when you're talking with someone who has never heard of web archiving, it can be very challenging to explain what you refer to when you're saying you're working with web archives, because it can be confused as if you were working with web files. Another linguistic barrier is that there is a lack of web archiving tools and websites and training materials in Spanish. So it can be difficult if you don't speak English very well to get started in web archiving. And finally, a barrier that we think is very important to point out is that the Internet Archive, which is the largest web archive in the world, which receives millions of visitors every month, is only available in English. So if someone does not speak English, it can be very challenging for them to access and benefit from all of the content that is publicly available on the Internet Archive.
And besides the linguistic barriers that have been mentioned by Alan, which are huge, besides that, we have some economic barriers in the case of Latin American countries. The first of all is related with the cost of web archiving services, which are really expensive for some countries in Latin America that have a low income. And by other hand, all the things related with the infrastructure for storing large amounts of data, and we're talking about a really large amount of data. In this case, we need I don't know, to have computers, big computers that have all the storage available, and this is really cost with high cost, and it's not really easy for universities or institutions in Latin America to face these economic barriers. Then, by other hand, we have the social or cultural barriers, and first of all, is important to mention the lack of digital librarians in Latin America. Most of the people that work at the libraries, they are just technical. They don't have some or they are not a specialist in digital stuffs. Then this is a very big barrier. And the training at universities and memory institutions, there are very few people who are working with this, and if you wanted to start, it's really difficult to find the training. By other hand, and probably this is connected with the first one, is the lack of awareness of aware archiving, not only by the people who are in charge of the I don't know, politician areas, but between the professors, or I don't know, the undergraduate or graduate programs, they don't take into account these kind of issues.
Hi everyone, I'm Verónica, and I'm collaborating with this interesting project. And just to show and continue talking about those social barriers, we can take into account this example, that in Spanish Wikipedia, entry for web archiving was created in 2023. The same entry in English was created in 2006. And this team create that entry because we noticed that there was not information in Wikipedia to explain the meaning of archivado web, that is the translation of web archiving. Another example is that the Scopus database, only 2 papers out of 900 are related to archivado web or web archiving. On the web archiving have Latin American authors. This can illustrate the gap between what is being developing in the global north, and what happened in the south of the planet. Another barrier are those related to technical barriers, and it can be shown about the difficulty of writing the metadata on another language different from English. The default metadata fields in web archives are in English because they were defined in English, and the lack of support for the creation of multilingual collections is another barrier, because we cannot have the metadata in another language different from English. So there is really complicated to develop a collection and do not have the terms in another language different from English. It is a very important technical barrier that we are encountering and that we need to face and solve.
After discussing these 4 barriers, we will now talk about the risks of this gap between the global north and south in terms of the lack of web archives in the global south. The first risk is that this lack of web archives creates a dependence on the Internet Archive and foreign institutions to preserve Latin American web history, when Latin American institutions should also have a say on which type of web contents are preserved about our own region. And another very important risk is that there can be a digital divide between the global north and south in terms of archiving and preservation of web content. And this is very evident on the map of web archiving initiatives that is available on Wikipedia. And here you can see visually the digital divide, where almost every country in Europe and North America and some in Asia have their own web archiving initiatives, but in Latin America, at least, they have not been added to the map. And also Africa and Southeast Asia have little to no web archiving initiatives as well. So if anyone is preserving content from these regions, the decision on what to preserve is made on the global north and not on the global south. And finally, some possible solutions to this problem, at least for Latin America, one could be starting mentorship programs so that memory institutions, national libraries, or universities can start their own web archiving programs or initiatives. And this links to our second solution, which is to collaborate with universities and more institutions in Europe and North America, which have years of expertise and experience. They can collaborate with Latin American institutions so that they can create collections together. For example, instead of just creating a collection in the United States or in Europe and not consult or discuss the selection of seeds and the crawling process with Latin American people or people from the global south if they are archiving contents from the global south. A third solution could be having some introductory web archiving workshops for librarians, archivists, or digital humanists in Latin America. And these workshops should prioritize free or open tools for web archiving so that these people can be encouraged to create their own web collections, even if they are very small in scale, but using free tools instead of proprietary tools. And finally, a very important step towards supporting web archives and web archiving in other languages is to translate the user interfaces of web archiving tools to multiple languages so that people whose first language is not English or who don't speak English at all can feel comfortable using web archiving tools and not having to only use them in English.
Thank you very much for your attention to this presentation. Here you can see the names of the whole team, and we are open to receive your comments and your suggestions because we are in the process of constructing this web archive for those social feminist movements. Here are the sites, Huellas Incómodas project and Huellas Incómodas web collections, and we really appreciate to visit those projects and contact us for your comments, your questions, and all the information that you can provide. It is really valuable for us. Thank you, everyone.